Alrighty, thank you so much for those of you that are taking the time out of your schedule to either join us now or to watch this at some point. I know that this year has been tumultuous to say the least. And so because we are all administering the SBAC this year for our testing grade levels, I hope that you are able to gain something out of our time together. So anytime we do a math PD or it's math related, of course, I want to make sure we get opportunities to engage in some mathematics. So the very first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to put yourselves in the minds of a student or a thinker and consider this. So it's just a small little image. And what are some things you might notice or wonder? And then give you a chance to either respond in the chat or just give it a chance for those of you watching maybe the video. All right, so I might hear from some students to say that I noticed that those black pieces are all separated. And I say, oh, okay, well, what happens if you kind of took those and if you use your mind to possibly move them together? How much of it would we have that was either composed of black or that was left over of the red? And so I would like to believe that if we took those with our mind and we moved those blacks over, you would see that there's actually half of the figure, half of the rectangle or half of the square that's actually comprised of red. So then you might be able to say that the red represents a half of the entire whole piece that we have. You might say, well, okay, well, if we knew that, and we know that yellow representation or color is one part or one half of that half portion, then we would know that the yellow represents 1/4. So these, again, very much like a number talk, they're called fraction talks. There are resources available on the math website that we'll maybe touch on later. But I just want to make sure you know that these are available to you. And I love it because it's a low floor, high ceiling task that opens up to students without telling them, here's what you have to think. It's allowing them the opportunity to share whatever they might be seeing. And you could obviously take it to the deep as you want it based on whatever they're answering. All right, so let's go ahead and look at what's working. So I always say, like, obviously, I hope to share some things with you that you might be able to take and better help you prepare your students for success. But there are things that all of us are already doing, you know, whether you're new to the grade level in terms of testing, or maybe it's a different grade level that you're, comfortable with or prior experience teaching. I know that there are things that you are currently doing to help your kiddos with success. So I'll give you a moment to pause and think about that. Now, one of the things that I hear oftentimes is when we talk about a curriculum, and that's to say, well, I'm using what we have available to us. So it's a lot of times teachers will use, in fact, I was in a classroom earlier today and I saw, of course, piles of them. These are the getting ready for SBAC booklets. And so these come with our Go Math curriculum. And so different grade levels, the colors will look different, but these are a great way. So in them, they have not only performance tasks, but they also have which is similar to the computer adaptive portion of the test, which is why we're here to focus on today, sample questions to help your kiddos be successful. And so that's something that I heard people do. Something else that I often hear people say is they'll either do the practice or the training tests, or some people might even go ahead a step further and use some of the IABs, which in our district, I know that we utilize for our benchmarks, but some teachers are using those to either practice a particular concept or even just to further expose kids in terms of the text structure. What does it look like when we take the real test? So there's a variety of things of what you might be doing, whether it be for preparing kids for success in math or language arts. But I always want to acknowledge first that there are things that you are already doing to help your kiddos. Now, I don't mean to show these to be bringing us down, but this is the reality for a lot of our students. There's a lot of anxiety and a lot of frustration when it comes to taking these assessments on the computer. And I mentioned this if you happen to join the other previous session where we talked about performance tasks. For all of our kiddos, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, this is the first year that they're taking the summative SBAC. And that's because, of course, we know what transpired in 2020 when our current 5th graders were 3rd grade at the time. So I just want us to be mindful and understanding not only whether it's new for you, we know that it's also new for our kiddos as well. So having looked at this, we have to also understand that this reality is a little bit bleaker for some of our groups of students. So here, what I have for you is just looking at some trends, and this data is available to us from CASP. I think we're joined by another person. Give me a moment to add that person. Okay. And so here we have some data, and we're looking at it for both 3rd grade in regards to Latinx students and 3rd grade regards to African-American students. And what I want to make sure we understand is we're looking at data that has been compiled over a variety of years. And the most recent data that we have available to us is in 2019. So in 2019, because that is the last year that our kiddos took the summative SBAC, at least for the data we have in our state, and you can see that there was a discrepancy for our Latinx kiddos of 46 points. So we compare how did our kiddos that are Latinx compare to that of their Caucasian or white counterparts. They scored 46 points on average below that other group. Now, if you looked at the African-American students, you can see a very similar gap. You're seeing in 2019, the last year we had it, 67 in terms of the discrepancy. Now, this is in third grade. So if you could imagine, how does that reflect or compare to as our students go on from grade to grade? By the end of fifth grade, and for most of us, the end of elementary school, you're looking at point discrepancies that have only expanded or compounded. So I know for Latinx students, we're looking at a difference of 58 points as opposed to 46. And I think I have it right here. Give me a second. What was the discrepancy for our African-Americans? It was 83. So again, by the end of fifth grade for our Latinx, you're looking at from 46 points, which is currently at third grade, to 53, and opposed to 58 when we go for our African-American kiddos. So either way, when you look at, 83 for African-Americans. Either way you look at it, we're looking at some realities that kind of are stark. But I want to make sure we understand, not to say that, we want to, just sit here and just fixate on it, but to say that we understand that there are some things that we need to try to address. Now, this is something with regards to our groups in terms of ethnicity, but if we look at in terms of what about for our English language learners, and for us in our particular district, I know that this represents a large makeup of our sites and our students, you're looking at something similar to that. So in this case, you're seeing there are 56% discrepancy. Again, we're still looking at third grade. Now, I understand that we could sit here and dwell on what are the discrepancies, and that's not my point, but I wanted to make sure we're at least starting our conversation here. Now, of course, you're probably thinking to yourself, it's not fair, and you're right, it absolutely isn't fair. So now that we know this, what is that we're currently doing in our classrooms, or we're not already doing in our classrooms, to best prepare kiddos and help kind of eliminate, or at least at the very least reduce some of those discrepancies? So our goals for today, this is what we're trying to accomplish in our brief time together. And to be honest, SBAC, I could have a PD full day, days plural, because there's so much to really glean from it, whether you've been administering for years or you're new to administering SBAC. So our goals are to better understand the mathematical claims. If you happen to join our session when we talked about the performance task, we addressed that, but I don't think that it would still be beneficial, because of course there's so much to know. Now, when we talk about scores, I think a lot of times there's some confusion and uncertainty with how are scores compiled, how are they presented. So we're going to dig a little bit into that. And then the last thing is we're going to, of course, talk about the resources. Things are already made for you, and how could you utilize what's there? So claims. So we want to make sure we understand that there are 5 claims when we talk about SBAC. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about language arts or in our case, math, there are still 5 claims that you're looking at. You have the overarching claim, and then you have 4 claims that are specific to the actual content. So let's go ahead and dig into those. Now, this is a quote, so I'll give you a moment to read about it. This comes from the content specifications. And one of the things I think is really important is to see what were the designers, the people that created SBAC, what were they hoping to accomplish and trying to create? So I'll give you a moment to read that to yourself. Hopefully you were able to get through that, but what I did see was in the chat that there was a question related to earlier. We referenced a book of the curriculum, and so that's Getting Ready for SBAC, and that comes from our HMH or our Go Math K5 or MyHRW in 612. So again, it's a Getting Ready for SBAC booklet. They're consumable, so each student should have their own copy, and if you wanted to track one down or needed help with that, first step I would suggest speak to your administrator, and then thereafter always you can shoot an email to myself, and we can kind of rope in people that might be more familiar with the process of acquiring those from our actual department over here that houses all the warehouse books. So something I really want to point out is the fact that even though when we talk about the Smarter Balanced Assessment, it focuses on skills. It really tries to bring everything together. So that last sentence, this kind of learning and teaching requires a focus on complex performances, as well as the testing of specific concepts, facts, and skills. Earlier today, I was the privilege of working with some students in a model lesson. One of the things we talked about was, if you look at math in the real world and you take that in comparison to what we had traditionally kind of thought of math as, it's very, very different. And I think that's one of the things we have SBAC looking so different too, is because the test is a variety of concepts or skills that are assessed in even just one item. So it's very difficult to say, oh, we're just going to test one thing. There's usually a variety of things they're taken into consideration when they construct the items. And I think that's because we're trying to more closely match what it is mathematically in the real world does it look like. So having that, I think, helps us kind of ground our conversation. And this is something else that I wanted to make sure we do, which is to say, let's go ahead and make connections whenever possible. And so one of the big things when we talk about our claims, I want to make sure we drive home is the idea that these are very much connected to our standards for math practice. So in math, just like very similar to in science, we have content standards, and those standards are going to be different no matter whether you're teaching first grade or whether you're teaching 12th grade. But we also have these practice standards. And I tell teachers, whether you're kindergarten or high school, you're holding students accountable for these 8 math practices. And that's to say, it doesn't matter what grade you're in, you are always looking for these things throughout the course of your instruction in the year. These 8 math practices are what they base a lot of the claims for in math. So when we talk about, what am I doing to prepare kiddos for success? Whenever you are working on these 8 math practice standards, you're helping your students best prepare for success on the SBAC. Now, you may look at it traditionally this way, and this is just a list of 8, but I know that some people have lumped them together, and I want to make sure we kind of build off of this to help us better understand the claims. So one of the first things is to say reasoning and explaining. We want our students talking quite a bit in math, and we want to make sure they feel comfortable explaining the rationale, not only behind why they're doing things, but what they're doing. Modeling and using tools. We want kids to be comfortable with not only using models, but also making sense and understanding what it is. So for example, today, and again, one of those lessons we were working on, students were being asked to take a word problem or a situation and then construct an equation that could be used to solve that very same word problem. In that case, they're modeling with mathematics. They're taking the real world situation and creating some mathematics to be able to solve that. And of course, that will look different whether you're teaching 3rd grade all the way through high school, but understanding that these are things we want kiddos doing. Seeing structure and generalizing, I always tell people this is one of the things that I think is overlooked a lot in math. Math is much, much more than just looking at, can we compute, can we get right answers? A lot of times it's looking for the beauty and the structure. Are there patterns that are happening? Are there some things that are building off of other things that we're doing? And those would be our 2 math practices, 7 and 8. And then the overarching, you see on the far left side in gray, that's making sure that we can always make sense of the math and persevere. And that's really at the core of what we're doing every time we're engaged in mathematics, trying to make sense of it, right? So this, like I said, hopefully helps us better understand the claims that we're going to dig into. Now, for those of you that may not be aware, there's some definitely great news, which is the fact that this year, the SBAC has less items. So in a traditional school year, if you're looking at this, this is the blueprints. And I can put those, not only are they available on the math website, which we'll look at later, but I can also put that inside the chat. So if you wanted to be able to see a hard copy, you can find them all as well if you search. But these are the blueprints. Now in a traditional school year, you will see the total number of items that are assessed by claim. So if you look right here on this left-hand side, what we're looking at are the various claims. And I told you that there are 4 in addition to the one overarching. And then if you look over the far right side, it says, based on that claim, here's how many items my students could expect to encounter. So if you look far right over here, just real quick, we see about 20 items for claim 1, about 10 items for both claims 2 and 4, and another 10 items for claim 3. Now, if you compare that with this year, as I mentioned, we have an adjusted, as they refer to it, and you can see it up there, that adjusted blueprint. We're looking at almost half of the quantity of items. So in claim 1, now we're looking at 10 total items. Claims 2 and 4, we're looking about 7 items. And then communicating, reasoning, or claim 3, we're looking at 6. So in a nutshell, we're looking at a significantly reduced assessment, both for language arts as well as mathematics, this year on the actual summative SBAC. Now, if you looked in the far right corner, you may say to yourself, Gabriel, I think you got the year wrong. that says 2021. That is because this was last year where they kind of released it with the expectation that all schools would administer the summative SBAC, and they have unchanged or at least kept the same adjusted blueprints for this year. So in terms of the weight of claims, I think it's helpful to understand kind of how are these things scored? Are they all equal balance in terms of how they're going to be weighted when they produce the scores for our students? And no. So if you're talking about claims 1, 2, 3, 4, we talk about first, claim 1 is about half of the test. So that's the bulk. And when we talk about claim 1, I want to be clear, that is what is it students are expected to do in your grade level. So if you're teaching 4th grade, what are those standards that 4th graders are held accountable to? Those would be your concepts and your procedures, which is half of the test. And those other claims, claims 2, 3, and 4, those are more so like our practice standards that don't change no matter whether you're in kindergarten all the way to when you're in high school. Those are communicating, reasoning, problem solving, and modeling and data analysis. That's another 50%. So really half the test comes from claims 2 through 4, half of the test is claim 1. Now, what is claim 1? I always say it's usually where it's clear cut. Students know what they need to do. Doesn't mean they can do it, but they know what needs to be done, right? So I have a problem, maybe it's adding fractions. I can see, I know I have this fraction plus this other fraction. That's the claim 1 problem. Now, a lot of times people think, oh, claim 1 is almost all your selected response. In a large part, yes, but there are sometimes still where people might forget when we talk about claim 1, it's not just procedures. It's concepts and a procedure. So meaning kids do have to still understand conceptually whatever concept we're talking about. And that's what makes up claim 1. Remember, 50% of the test. And claims 2, problem solving. This is where kids have to make sense of what needs to happen. And today, the lesson I happen to be in, of course, I had a kiddo essay in this particular word problem, Mr. Ward. What do we need to do? Are we adding these fractions or are we multiplying these fractions? Because it always goes back to, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I just need to know what needs to be done. And that's what problem solving is. We want our kiddos to be able to say, I can make sense of what's happening here and understand what needs to be done to be able to achieve an answer. As far as communicating reasoning, this is really just to say we want kids talking more during mathematics. We want kiddos to be able to feel comfortable to say, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong. Or you know what, I'm right, and here's why I'm right. They're always providing these conjectures, these statements, and they're backing it up with evidence. One of the easiest things you could think about is justification. Always try to have kiddos justify whatever they're saying in mathematics. Oh, you think so-and-so is wrong. Why? Oh, you think that this person happens to be saying this, and you agree with them. Why? Always going to the idea of justifying whatever it is we might be talking about. And claim 4, this one, and I want to be very clear, is lumped together with claim 2. So again, claim 4, modeling and data analysis, is joined together with claim 2 when it reports out. And the reason they do that is because it's somewhat involving problem solving. One of the big discrepancies is to say that in modeling and data analysis, a lot of times they're taking some tables, some graphic. Earlier today, we were looking at some sample problems for 5th grade. They were involved in solving some line plots to be able to add and subtract fractions. So it took it beyond just a, hey, I'm telling you, you need to add these 2 fractions. They had to make sense of the model or of the data that was presented to them, and then be able to compute and solve whatever it is they need to do. So let's go ahead and look at this same different. And what we're looking at here are 2 sample problems, and these are sample problems from SBAC. So this is not problems I made up or problems from our curriculum. These are sample items from SBAC, and we're looking at how are these 2 items the same, or how are these 2 items different? So I'll give you a moment to think about it. And if anyone wants to post something in the chat just to rattle off something that's the same about them or something that's different, I'll give you a moment. I see someone said different because one of them has letters, A, B, C, D, or choices, and then the other one looks like we are writing or typing something in. 100%, you have that. You see where you have selected response versus a short answer or constructed response. Some of you might be saying, well, one of them involves kind of more like a story problem, right? And the other one is a little bit more of just looking at the data in the form of a line plot. When we look at these, I want to be clear, these happen to be the same claim, and we're going to dig a little bit deeper into them, but they happen to both involve where kids are having to take some information and make sense of it. So on the left-hand side, where we have Susan has 3 times as many books, that's comparable to what I had alluded to earlier, where you have a situation and you're trying to construct an equation that matches or connects to that situation. When we look on the right-hand side, still involving some modeling and data analysis. Now, the difference here is we're not taking a word problem and constructing an equation from it. No, we're given data. We have to make sense of what that data is and then produce an answer based on whatever data it's asking me, right? And I know the line plots, especially for our 5th graders, kind of tricky because you're having, or actually for all our kiddos, trying to make sense of what do those X's indicate, in what does it mean? More X's on one thing, what does each of those individual X's mean? So these are some good sample problems, but I just wanted to kind of use this to jump our conversation in terms of claims and how they look. They look very different, but yet they both are involving the same math claim. Again, claim 4. So let's look at some more sample items, and we're going to try our best to identify which claim it is. And I want to start with the idea, you don't have to see a problem and identify quickly, oh, I know what claim it is. But I'd like for us to be more comfortable to say, I know that if I'm giving my students problems that look like this, I'm preparing them for success on blank claim. Because if you're not doing problems like blank, then you may not preparing kiddos for the most success they might have. Because again, they are graded on those 4 areas. I'll never forget working with one teacher, and she said, I don't feel as comfortable in some of those other things. I really want to drill and kill the concept. I want to make sure my kids understand whatever blank is. But remember, when we talk about the makeup of scores, if you're only going to focus on one thing, specifically claim 1, you're only preparing your kiddos for success on half of the test. So it's really important that we're mindful of just these various things that they're expected to do so that we can make sure our instruction is matching that. So here we have a problem. Students are asked to change 1 hour and 20 minutes to minutes. And then we have some statements from some fictitious students. So it says, Kevin says an hour and 20 minutes equals 120 minutes. Maggie says an hour and 20 minutes equals 80 minutes. Max says an hour and 20 minutes equals 30 minutes. And Julie says 1 hour and 20 minutes equals 620 minutes. Whose statement is correct and why? And I'll give you a moment. You can read those other things as to why. Remember, what I'm asking us to do at the moment is try to see if we can identify which claim do we think it is. Claim 1, concepts or procedures. Claim 2, problem solving. Claim 3, communicating and reasoning. Or claim 4, modeling and data analysis. Which do we put? And if you want to just type that in the chat, some people saying claim 3. Now, even though students aren't themselves having to speak, absolutely, we're involving claim 3 because we're talking about why is someone right, why is someone wrong. And those are the 2 biggest things that you might be asking in your classroom. Do you agree or disagree with so-and-so? And then of course, whether they agree or whether they disagree, why do you agree? Why don't you agree? Let me give you 2 different scenarios of a classroom. So let's say we have classroom A. And in classroom A, teacher provides students with here's how you change from minutes to hours or hours to minutes, and then gives kids an opportunity to be able to do some practice problems centered around that. Sounds good? Kiddos are getting right answers and we're moving great. Let's contrast that with a different classroom. In a different classroom, teacher pulls some student work. Teacher says, you know what? One of the students said that they thought that 1 hour was equal to 100 minutes. Do you agree with them or not? Why do you think someone might say an hour is equal to 100 minutes? And then gives the kids a chance for kids to talk about that. Right there, that simple tweak or change in terms of our instruction is helping really give kids an opportunity to engage in our claim 3. You're getting kids a chance to place themselves. I don't think 1 hour is 100 minutes, but here's why a student might think an hour is 100 minutes. And we could have some great conversations. So simply, I think when we're trying to get kiddos to be successful for claim 3, we want to give them more opportunities to talk. We want to get them to not only justify their own answers, but make sure they're being placed in the situation or in the perspective of a peer and say, why would someone do this? So again, small little tweaks to our instruction that are hopefully going to be more powerful. Here, different problem. Here it says enter the symbol. greater than, less than, or equal to that compares these two fractions. So take a moment, think for a moment. Again, which of the 4 claims do you think this would be? Again, claim 1, concepts and procedures. Claim 2, problem solving. Claim 3 are communicating and reasoning, or claim 4, modeling and data analysis. See some of you that are saying claim 1, and that makes sense, right? It's pretty straightforward. Now, it doesn't mean a student knows the right answer, but they know what they need to do. They know that they're either comparing greater than, less than, or equal to. So this is absolutely a claim 1 problem. Here's a different one. This says click the spaces of the figure to shade 3/5 of figure R. So kids would have the ability with their little cursor to place it on those individual rows and represent or shade 3/5 of figure R. So which claim do you think this might entail? So I see that I have 2 different answers. I have one person stating that they think it's claim 1, and I have another person stating that they think it's claim 2. So I could understand why some people may think that it involves some problem solving. Well, it's not clear. They're not sure how to shade 3/5. But because it's asking them specifically to shade that, we know that, remember, constant procedures, claim 1, isn't just, oh, just nitty gritty, can they compute things in math? It's also assessing, do they conceptually understand something? And that's just what this is getting at. Can students represent 3/5 in terms of this, a model, or in terms of a representation, right? So it is claim 1 for this example. Here's another one. This happens to be a 3rd grade problem. It says enter the fraction located at point A on the number line. Remember, claim 1, claim 2, claim 3, or claim 4. Which do you think this might be? And for those of you viewing on video, please pause, take a moment to think about it. So this one's a little bit trickier. I will say that I shared this at one of the math conferences and they were blown away. This happens to be a claim 1. And it is a very, very tricky question, but I want to be very clear in terms of what could we do to best prepare kiddos for success. Even today in the model lessons I was working with, and that was 5th grade lessons, they had some difficulty understanding when they added fractions together, their answer. And so one of the things I almost always try to get at is, can we get students to reason through benchmarks? So in this particular case, we might say, looking at point A, do you think A is closer to 1 or closer to 0? So let's start there. Then other things we could talk about is A appear to be less than 1/2, equal to 1/2, or greater than 1/2? Because we want to make sure kids feel comfortable establishing those benchmarks. Okay, I know about 1/2 is here, midway through between 0 to 1. And I can see that A is slightly closer to 0. Consequently, my answer in terms of the fraction is going to be something less than 1/2. And we could divvy it up further or partition up our number line even further. If that's 1/2, A is between maybe 1/4 and that. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the exact answer. I'm sure they would accept a variety, but we really want kiddos getting through open number lines and how they could kind of strategically, using benchmarks, approximate where things are. And here's the last one we'll look at. And this says, Stephen made some snack mix. He used 1/4 of raisins and 2/4 of nuts to make 1 serving. He wants to make 5 servings of snack mix. How many cups of snack mix are in 5 servings? Which claim do you think this one might be? Again, claim 1, constant procedures. Claim 2, problem solving. Claim 3, communicating and reasoning. Or claim 4, modeling and data analysis. And that's right, this one is claim 2. It is involving problem solving. So even though students may not know, the answer, they have to first understand what needs to happen. Am I adding these fractions? Am I subtracting these fractions? Am I multiplying? Am I dividing? What's happening to be able to figure out before I can even actually do that step or that computation? So I think that, again, the goal isn't for you to say, look at a problem in my lesson and I know that that's what claim it is. That's not what my intent or our goal is, but rather we want to make sure we're being mindful of these various claims so that we can prepare students with giving them exposure to these various ways that they're going to be expected to attest. So here's a routine that I'm just think is one of the best things if you're not already doing with your students. And these are which one does not belong. So the goal is for us to be able to say there are 4 various answers. and these are looking at our claims, in which 4 do you think doesn't go with all the rest? And then we talked about justification. So we want kiddos to not only say, I think A, or I think B, or I think C, or D, or whatever they say, but why? Why do you think whatever it is you're thinking?
I think A, because it doesn't, because it's separate from the other claims that are all kind of put together.
Yeah, claim 1, and one of the people had said at one of the workshops we're at, claim 1 is kind of in all the other ones. You can't do communicating reasoning in a 3rd grade SBAC if you're not involving the 3rd grade concepts that are going to be involving communicating reasoning. You can't do problem solving if you don't involve the whatever grade level you're teaching those concepts and procedures. So I totally get it, right? I've heard different answers because I've seen some people say, oh, you know what? It could be either problem solving or modeling and data analysis, either B or D, because those are the only ones that don't report by themselves. Both problem solving and model analysis are connected and tied when it talks about the reporting and the way scores come back to you. I've heard some people say communicating and reasoning, because that's the one where they're really gonna most likely on constructive responses, involving some talking, where they're taking it beyond just answering a question and kind of communicating their reasoning. So these activities or routines aren't centered around what's right and what's wrong. It's more so geared towards giving kiddos an opportunity to kind of state their thinking and then back it up with some justification. And what I love to say is there really isn't a wrong answer. It's really, what do you think and why do you think that? So great routines, if you're not using them, there are already, whether you're teaching fractions or whether you're teaching multiplication or place value, or whatever it is you're working on, there are some already made which one doesn't belong activities for you to use with your students. Now, scores. One of the big things when we talk about understanding SBAC, I go back to, how did the scores come to us? Like how are they reported, right? And one of the things that I love this meme is that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works, because what I a lot of times hear is teachers think that they're going to be reported in terms of standards. And that's how a lot of our stuff is. Of course, hey, you can look at our report card, based and rooted in standards. But when we talk about SBAC, it's not going to give us, based on one standard, how our student performed. Now, it'll be close to that, but that's not exactly how they report. So understanding that, again, how do those scores work? So here what we're looking at is a summative sample, and this happens to come from one student, and you can see all of the information that's presented based on that summative assessment. So first off, you're going to see, did they meet or not meet the standard for that particular test? In this case, we're looking at math scores. So we can see that they either met, nearly met, didn't meet, or exceeded. In this case, we can see where they're at. Then we're also going to see by claim. And that's where I really want to make sure we drive home that conversation of claims, because what you are going to see instead of standards, you are going to see how do they perform on the various claims. So we could even use this potentially not only for our students, but also for us as instructors. If we are really having students perform exceedingly well in one of these various areas, maybe it's communicating reasoning, we can say, you know what I was doing to really help best prepare kiddos for success in communicating reasoning, I'm going to continue to do that, because I can see as a class, they were doing a little bit better in that particular claim. But if you see, you know what, hey, maybe problem solving and modeling and data analysis, not one of the highest in my particular class, that might in turn say, oh, well, I know that I need to work a little bit more on that. Or you know what, there were certain things that I didn't do this year that maybe I would have liked to, and I want to make sure I do that so that I can improve upon that. So I just want to make sure we understand, you're going to get an overall score, but you're also going to get claim scores for each of the various, again, even though there are 4 claims, it reports out 3 ways. Claim 1, concept procedures, problem solving, modeling, and data analysis. Those claim 2 and claim 4, both together, and then of course, communicating reasoning, claim 3, reporting separately. So what you're looking at here is not summative. You could even see in the words there, IAB. This is what you're going to get when we look at our IABs, or interim assessment blocks. And last week, or for those of us that may have joined for the previous session on performance tests, we had some questions related to, I see IABs when I go in there, but I also see this FIAB. And those are the focused interim assessment blocks. And those are just to say that they're focused on less targets or less concepts. If it's really focused on one thing, then it's going to be an FIAB in comparison to the IABs, which are blocks or chunks of data, right? So when you look at the IABs, as opposed to having a 4-point rubric, right? Did they nearly met? Did they meet? Are they exceeding? You're only going to get 3 options for our IABs. They're going to get either they were above it, at or near, or below it. And so those are the 3 ways that you're going to have scores reported out when you look at the IABs, which I will say, if you're not already using in terms of a practice and preparation for success on SBAC, please do so. I know that we have them for the actual benchmarks, but I think you can do a lot more than just what is mandated in terms of what we do for our benchmarks. Here, and this is something that I think is new, and it ties, well, newer at least, ties directly to when we talk about claims. So when you want to look at summative data and you want to get to the nitty gritty, and you talked earlier about how it's not going to report by standard, one of the things you could use are the targets. Now, if you're looking at English language arts, you're going to get target scores for each of the 4 claims for ELA. But when you look at mathematics, we talked earlier about how you really have only one claim, claim 1, that focuses on your content standard. So what is specific to 3rd grade, or what is specific to 4th grade, or what is specific to whatever grade you're teaching, that's claim 1. And you're only going to get the target scores in math for claim 1. So you see here, and that's one of the things I think, and I just made a video that hopefully maybe we'll take a moment later to look at what's available there. How do you pull these? You're only going to be able to pull them for summative assessments. But if you look, you can really see, I think, helpful information. So what you see on the far right, that just indicates to you, did my students meet or not meet that particular target? That's important, right? But I also think it's important to say, well, how did they perform on that in comparison to the rest of the tests? So what I want to make sure we say is, okay, let's say, for example, all right, above. Well, because they scored above, they did better on target D than maybe they did on some other sections. But you might still see that, you know what? They were above in one section, but it was still either similar or maybe worse than other sections. So I think that when we look at this one column where it says performance relative to the entire test, that should be a good, I think, for us as teachers to be able to say, what did we do really well this particular year? Or maybe what are some areas that we need to focus more on based on how they're performing for this individual targets? And again, that's target data that is only available for the summative assessment. So being that our kiddos didn't test last year for summative or the previous year, I think this is probably more looking ahead to the future, something you might do at the end of this year once scores have been compiled. Now, this kind of just breaks it down. How does it come? Scores come overall, as we mentioned too. Comes by claims, and then for math, at least for claim 1, you are going to be able to get down to the drill down for the target. So just kind of that various ways if you kind of look at it, zoomed out versus zoomed in. And this just takes it a step further for us to see how does SBAC put it together. Now, when we talk about targets, that's the closest, as I said, to standards. And standards are based on that. When you think about understanding the targets, I will admit I was very confused. I said, well, why does SBAC use these targets? You know, some of us are barely feeling comfortable understanding the standards for my particular grade level. And now you lump into this other thing with regards to targets. And so I want to make sure we understand those targets, which you can see right there. Those really are the headings or headers for your standards. So if you look at claim 1, right there where it says assessment targets, you can see B, C, I, those are the ones that are the headers. So like the cluster, if you will, for math for our standards. I think this is helpful because we can see about how many items are your students going to be expected to answer, and that CAT, that CAT, the computer adaptive portion of the test for each of these various areas. So they really divvy up into 2 sections, priority and supporting. And I'm not going to linger here, but I do want to make sure you understand that you could, if you wanted to see, where is more of the test? I understand 50% is claim 1, but where specifically in claim 1, where specifically in my standards, should I focus more instruction or at least more time to dedicate to reviewing based on how many items are going to be assessed on that? Second scope part.
And where do we find that?
Those are in the blueprints. You can find them directly on the math website. Let me go ahead and put in the chat right now. I had saved, let's see, let me end a share for a second. And I'll place it in the chat, the file, but I will show you also for those of you that aren't in our session, that want them, where you could access them in our math website. All right, so let's get into some of our resources, which is where we kind of want to get to. And that's to say, I hope, let's share that again. I hope that you understand that there's a lot of things that have already been made for you and a lot of things that are already available to you. So please don't go and recreate the wheel. Yes, while I believe 100% that you can go in and make some amazing things, I don't think all of us have the time to be able to do that. And I don't want you to have to do that. So what do you have that is already available to you? So there's some places where you can go to access resources to prepare your kiddos for success on the computer adaptive portion of the test, which is what we're trying to drill home today. So the first thing is we talked about the IABs. Now, in addition to those IABs, if you weren't sure, you also have acronyms again, ICA, and those are the interim comprehensive assessments. So those ICAs, that's really like to say, in a traditional year, here's what the SBAC would look like. Usually about 30 items on the computer adaptive portion of the test, in addition to the performance task, that other portion. And if you're interested in learning more about performance tasks, please take a look at that recording that is available on the YouTube page. So if you're using the IABs, I really look at it as you have two ways. You could use it kind of maybe whole group, and that would be more so going through the viewing system, and I will show you where you could access this on CASP. Or you could directly assign it to your students, just like you probably did in our district to be able to administer the benchmarks. You could assign any individual block, or if you wanted that approximately 30 question item test, you could assign the ICA. So again, those are things that you have available to you, and I'll show you where you could access those. What else? You also have the practice test. In the previous session, we talked about performance tasks. We really tried to drill home, what is the difference between the practice tests and the training test? And we will just say that the practice test has items individual to your grade level, whereas the training test, it's more just to get the kids' feet wet for them to see, and it's lumped by grade spans. So really prefer the practice test. And then you also have some sample items available in the CASP website. So you can click and you could find sample items, and I will show you again all these three things where you could access them. So that's a lot already, but of course there's more, right? There always has to be more. We took a step further, and on the math website, we created some additional sample items. So we looked at when you have these content specifications, they ruled out kind of like almost released items or items that had been used previously, and those we constructed and compiled into some slideshows. So really, I think there's an overabundance of resources, and I really think that you probably couldn't get through all of it if you wanted to, because there's just so much for you to be able to do. So those are all available on the math website. So we're going to look at two places. We're going to look at the math website, and we're also going to look at CASP. Let me go ahead and end the share, and then I'll take us over to CASP to start some of those resources. So here we are on CASP. And so the first thing I want to make sure you understand is that IABs, where you could go to access them. So you would come over here from the CASP website, and if you're not sure already, just simply Google CASP and you'll find it. But here I am on the CASP website. I'm going to click on Smarter Balance Interim Assessments. And now that I'm looking at the interim assessments, there's a variety of options. The viewing system, this is where, like I said, you would want to go. So if you want to take any of those items from the IAB or maybe the ICA, and you wanted to broadcast them onto the screen using your projector, you would go to the viewing system. This is your way to be able to show students. So I look at it this way. Maybe I assigned my students to give an IAB. They did it, but I noticed there's some items that maybe they had some difficulty with, or a concept that maybe was tough. I might pull up using the viewing system on my Elmore projector and show that particular item, and we can go through, hey, how did you solve it? What were you thinking here, right? So let me go ahead and log in with my Tom's account. So the same Tom's account you use for pretty much everything CASP related. And then you find your grade. So let's just say, for example, I was looking at third grade. Give it a moment to render. Here we go, third grade. And then now these are all of the third grade IABs, FIABs, or ICAs. Again, focus interim assessment blocks or interim assessment blocks. And so you could find any of them. Let's just say, for example, let's find one here, geometry, this third grade one. I click on it. And this is just like my students are going to see when they take the IABs or even the summative SBAC. And then here we go. This is actually showing students what really number one looks like on this IAB, in this case, third grade geometry for our kiddos. So again, I don't think this would be, I would start here. My suggestion, recommendation would be to use this after they've had opportunities to do it on their own and highlight specifically the problems that you kind of felt were maybe warranting additional either review or attention. So you could go through any one of these items. Unfortunately, it does require you to answer it to be able to move on. So if you want to say, I can't move to the next one just yet, click an answer and then move next. Well, you know what? Actually, I may be wrong. It looks like they tweaked it. Now it lets you move on. I misspoke. Well, there you go. You don't have to answer questions. You can go ahead and proceed on and on and on. This won't record or save your answers. It's not as if you're going to submit it and get a score. So this is not where you would go for your students to be able to do it themselves, but more so whole group conversations. So again, that was the viewing system. So if you wanted your kiddos to be able to take it themselves, you wanted to assign it, that would be where you go to here, where it says, now I have no sessions and I would start the session. So start a new session. I'm not going to go through its entirety, but here's where you would go. Now, I will say this is the same location you use for the summative. So you can see these options here. We are highlighting the interim assessment options, or those IABs. Please don't go to the summative until you're ready to actually administer based on your testing schedule at your site. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. So again, that would be for you either whole group doing it or doing it there here for assigning it to your students. But I mentioned to you also have the sample items. So I could search CASP and sample items, but I'm going to show you the math website that already has them available to you. So let me go ahead and do that now. So here's on the math website. And for those of you that may not familiar, I'll put it in the chat, but essentially it's tinyurl.com/math HLPUSD. And I always tell teachers, if you've ever received an email from me, the link is always in my signature. So you could simply just find an email, click on that, and you'll find it there. So you do need to be signed into your district Google account. I had a teacher email me the other day, said, can I please have access? I can't get in. So it is restricted to those of us in HLPUSD. So if you're using our district Google account, you'll be in. So from here, we want to specifically look at SBAC. That's what we're talking about today. And you can see right there, one of the first options is this SBAC sample item website. Again, this is going to redirect you once we click on this link, and you could Google it too, so you don't have to go through here. But what it takes you to is some sample items. And here you have the ability to go by your grade. So earlier we looked at third, let's look at fourth this time. So once you select your grade, you have both ELA, English Language Arts, as well as mathematics. So find first your subject, and then you could pick on the claim. So let's say, for example, you feel really comfortable in one claim, but maybe that's another area that you're not so sure. You've either done a great job of instructional, or you know that your kiddos warrant additional practice on that. Pick whatever claim you want. And then, of course, by targets. Now, if you don't know which target, every time you click on this, it just reduces the amount of items you're looking at. We're just filtering even further. But if you said to yourself, I don't know what target, I just want communicating and reasoning, all of these that you're looking at down below are communicating and reasoning. So you could do it one of two ways. You could just simply click on it. And when you click on it, you might show this to the whole class using your projector again, right? Or you do have the option to also kind of almost make like a practice test if you wanted for your kiddos, and you could kind of create a PDF to be able to be printed out. So let me go ahead and go back. If you were wanting to do that, all you would do is select the item. So again, let's say I opened it, I clicked on it, I'm like, yes, this item I want to have on my little small practice test I'm going to give students. So click select to print. And you say maybe, oh, you know what? I really also want this item. Go ahead and click on this one. Wait, let me make sure. Yep, that's the one I want. I can also click on add to print. And now I've just added 2 items here. Again, you could totally and absolutely show this whole group. You don't need to print this out, but if you wanted to give it a hard copy for your students to practice, click on whatever items or whichever items you wanted, and your cart will start to build up. So I'm just going to use these 2 that I've selected and click print to cart. And once you do, it kind of shows you, here's are the items you want. Here are the claims you're selecting and all the target details. It tells you even what the makeup of the item type is. You could adjust. So let's say you wanted, I want that question first. All right, fine. Click next. Here's just some options in terms of you being able to further select things. Just go ahead and skip that over in my opinion and click print to PDF. And what it's doing is it's generating a hard copy that I might, again, print, run off, and give to students if I wanted to as additional practice. I was seeing some problems here, me personally, but when I click on right here, download PDF, sure enough, there goes my PDF. It's downloaded. I'll go ahead and open this, or at least try to. And there you go. So here I go. I just randomly created those 2 items. Here as a teacher, it tells me what are those items, but this would probably be, if you wanted to hard copy and give it to your kiddos, here are those 2 items for kiddos to practice additionally. So here it is, part A, part B, and then here's that other item down below. So it's just going to kind of put it out more in a PDF version. Again, if you wanted to, you might just say, hey, I don't have time to run off things. I don't want my kiddos to do it independently. I want to lead some whole group class conversations, which is also very powerful. Then you would just broadcast that using your projector. So I'm going to close that PDF. and go back. Let's see, close that. So again, here from the sample items, you have the ability to select your subject, drill down as far as you want, whether it be claims or targets, or even just zoomed out any math and just pull up sample problems to whole group conversation or work on. So that's the sample items. We're back on the math website. Where else could you go? I also want to make sure you understand that you have some additional practice items. Those are the ones I alluded to earlier and where we took other released items. So this isn't on the CASP website. Go ahead and open this up. We looked at third, we looked at fourth, let's say I went to fifth. And you could say, based on claims, here's some things. So whether it be claim 2, claim 3, or claim 4, I could pull that up. Let's say if it were claim 2, problem solving. The same thing. This time for sure, it's geared more towards you showing whole group and leading some great class conversations. Maybe it's even a review you're doing with students. So here's the problem, you project it. If you are wanting more details for yourself, first of all, what's the answer? What are some things SBAC's expecting? Those answers or information is all below in the comments. I'll make sure I enlarge that so you can see what I'm talking about. Down here in the comments of the slide itself. But if you are presenting to students, it would obviously just be the problem in its entirety. So again, these are sample problems that we just literally cut and paste where they had released items. Kind of difficult to actually locate these, but we did our best to compile them and provide them to you so that you can make sure if you want additional practice, you have a lot of things, again, at your fingertips, whether it be whatever the various claims or just in general. So I'm going to close that slideshow again. Where did I find that? From the math website. We started first with those sample items. Those are from SBAC or CASP. And then we had those additional items that we constructed and compiled for you here. Let's see what else I wanted to touch on here. Oh, I had talked about those specific things for math. So earlier we talked about, oh, if you weren't sure what was going to be assessed specifically, those blueprints that we alluded to here on 21-22 SBAC docs, you could click on math specific. And then you'd be able to find those adjusted blueprints for both last year as well as this year, the same ones. I'll open that now. You can see what I'm talking about. So here it says the overall for grades 3 through 5, and then those specific, for example, to grade 3, or those specific to grade 4. So whatever grade level you teach, you would be able to find the nitty-gritty details that SBAC has released for us for this year that, again, is an adjusted blueprint or basically modified, less items. I'll go back. So I know that there are more things available here on the math website, but I really wanted to make sure we touched on both those sample items as well as the additional sample items that you have available to you at your fingertips. And we also highlighted some of the stuff on CASP. So we're going to wrap up our time together and really just go back to what we were trying to do. Our goal for today, let me go ahead and stop that share, sorry. Try it again. Our goals for our brief time together today were to helpfully develop a better understanding of the claims rather. We took a look at the actual scores of SBAC. How are they comprised, right? And then we also looked at some of the resources that have been compiled both on the math website as well as what's available to us via CASP. So again, I hope that you were able to expand on what you may already know, whether you're a seasoned veteran, you've been administering SBAC for years, or whether maybe you're new to our grade level, or maybe new to testing in general. I hope that you're able to take something out of our time together. I usually ask for just, if you wouldn't mind, what was your greatest takeaway, but I'll just ask that you consider kind of what did you get possibly out of our time together today? Think about it, reflect on it, and then I will say, if there was something that you deemed that was worthy or invaluable, please tag a teacher, pass it along, let someone else know so they might also benefit for some of the stuff that has been compiled and created for you on your behalf so that we can best prepare our kiddos for success on the SBAC. Thank you again for joining us. If you have questions, please, you can go ahead and take a moment now, unmute, ask away. Otherwise, I wish you a wonderful rest of your day.